All right, everybody, welcome to the Horse Illustrated webinar series. Of course, our special guest this month is Dan James of Double Dan Horsemanship. My name is Mary Cage. I'm the digital manager here at Horse Illustrated. We're so happy to have you all here today, and of course, to have Dan here to answer some great questions. Of course, if you're here, you know who Dan is, world-renowned horse trainer and entertainer of Double Dan Horsemanship. Originally from Australia, now residing in the beautiful state of Kentucky. Pretty much any discipline in the industry, you name it, he's probably done it. And of course, well known for his Liberty work and creation of the International Liberty Horse Association. So we'll be diving into all of that today. Kind of how it's going to work is I will ask some questions on behalf of Horse Illustrated. We'll run through those. And then we'll have a Q&A after those questions. So you all should see a Q&A button on your screen. That's where you'll type in any question you have. And after we get through my questions, we'll ask those. I'll kind of moderate those questions and ask them on your behalf for Dan. We also had a few submitted via social media. So we have those to ask at that point as well. But without further ado, we'll go ahead and dive into those questions. Dan, I always like to know with our guests kind of what developed your love for horses in the first place, and then a kind of a fun point on that is if you remember your first horse too.
You bet. Well, I guess firstly, thank you, Mary, for having me. It's a real honor to get to join you guys here on Horse Illustrated, and for everybody else that's made the time to jump on here this afternoon. I've been pretty excited about this opportunity to get to kind of talk and share with you guys. I guess to jump right in there and answer your question, as a kid growing up in Queensland, Australia, my parents sort of we were on working cattle ranches or stations back home, and mum and dad we always had horses around us when we were kids. But to be honest, my older brothers, they had motorbikes, and I was probably a little bit more gravitated initially towards them. But probably one of the things that always takes me back to it is that I was just always a huge fan of watching horses on film. Whether it be Young Black Stallion, Zorro, or all the great Hollywood films, of course, Man from Snowy River, amongst others. So that was probably one of the things that really, initially watching those horses on film, sort of drew me in. And then as a kid, just, obviously having the opportunity to be around them, that passion kind of, continued to sort of grow to, it was really probably just to see what were we able with very limited, knowledge and resources to be able to interact and that with those horses.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things that once you kind of develop that passion, it sticks with you. But my brothers were the same way. They always liked motorbikes and things like that. So we always joked they liked a different horsepower than my sister and myself did. But it's cool that, the real horsepower kind of manifested itself in you too. So, so when did you know that you kind of wanted to take that passion and turn it into a career and make a career out of training and being with horses?
Yeah, I think that really came pretty early on. As soon as I sort of had made that decision that, the horses was something that I really wanted to pursue, it was, I think you are always, and probably rightfully so, I think that you're always discouraged to be like a horse trainer, right? Like everybody's like, well, you got to, yeah, but what's your real job going to be? And so there was lots of different influences, growing up about people that wanted to see, okay, but all right, ride horses, do that, but do something else, as a way of income. And I think that deep down in my heart, I always knew that I would be pulled in this direction. For me, there just wasn't really, there was nothing else that I knew that I really wanted to pursue at that stage. And, it was substituted for a long time with, going and doing a farrier apprenticeship and shoeing and doing some, some dentistry and other elements like that around the horse. But it was always that passion of the interaction with the horse. I think that the worst thing that happens to just about every professional that I've, interacted with and, had a similar conversation with is that when you're growing up, you tend to have that one horse that essentially like makes you, right? Like that really makes some huge impacts in your life. And the problem with that situation is that most of us at that time have all the time in the world. And in addition to all the time in the world, we don't have the pressures from everything else. And so I think there's this stigma that we developed that like, oh, that's what horse training is what I'm doing right now. Well, it's only obviously just the tip of the iceberg when you're, getting to do that with your own horse. It looks very different when you start doing it for the public or on a professional basis.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. There's a big difference between, especially like you said, when you get that passion at a young age and it's just the tip of the iceberg versus making it your full-blown life and all of that. But obviously it's worked out pretty great for you. And most people know you from Double Dan Horsemanship. So I have to ask, how'd you kind of get started with Dan Steers?
Yeah, well, it was long walks along the beach with the sun sort of set. We were both in Western Australia at the time. I, of course, was up further in the north, and Steers was down the south. And there was several events that we ended up running into one another. And just, there was a lot of like ideas and principles that like aligned along with, the idea and the concept that very much that, in terms of just a business model of being able to share expenses and be able to do things like that. That was obviously a pretty big appealing part to it as well. And I think that both of us brought different skill sets and different mindsets to the business, which I think that was the real, success behind it, because we had a similar goal and passion, but we had enough differences to complement one another in being able to, to pursue it. So, back in, we met back about 2007, and then obviously as the years sort of went on, we, continued to pursue that. And of course, a lot of times, for those that aren't familiar, they'll see, the Double Dan Horsemanship brand over here in the US, and they're like, well, like there's only one of you. I'm like, I know, but there actually is two of us, and no, we're not brothers. We didn't have a mother that thought, well, we'll name them both Dan. It's actually two separate, just good mates. So yeah, he's a great guy, very, very funny, and always have huge admiration for his horsemanship.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have definitely noticed kind of people in the States get a little confused on that front. And sometimes the resemblance is a little uncanny in certain things. So
yeah, until we take our hats off, and of course, like when I'm way better looking.
Yeah.
There's always those funny pieces. Yeah.
So what exactly was it that kind of led to your decision to make the move from Australia to the United States?
Yeah, you bet. So, as a small start out, business in Australia, we quickly recognized in terms of like business opportunities and, I guess kind of to a degree, the American dream, right? Like that there was so much to do over here, that the industry was so big, and getting to come across, like we came across in 2010 during the World Equestrian Games, actually here in Kentucky. We weren't based here at that stage, obviously. And, Steers and I both seen, like one of the things that sort of stood out to us is that I will never forget, like we're here during the World Equestrian Games, essentially one of the biggest equine events on the face of the earth. And then 3 hours up the road, you've got Quarter Horse Congress.
Mm-hmm.
That is completely unaffected by the other biggest horse event in the world going on. And I think that was kind of like a real moment of like just the comprehension as to how large the industry is over here. Like if that happened in Australia, everyone that owned a horse would be at the one event, right? And, over here you've got those, just the pure, essentially numbers of people and horses and that involved in it. So we wanted to, pursue and coming over here, and it just ended up being sort of a pretty obvious choice for myself at the time. Steers was already married, and so he and his wife, essentially still to this day sort of run and operate Double Dan Australia, and then it gave the opportunity for us to expand over here. And it's it's what has been so fun over the years is that just back in November we were back for Equitana Australia. Well, I can, literally get off the plane and go to the event, and, Steers has the horses and, everything kind of set. And so it's kind of neat for a brand to be able to so easily transition from one country to the other.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's very important too to have those different perspectives from the two different countries. And you kind of touched on that and when you first came to the States for World Equestrian Games and noticed the vastness of the industry in the States. Um, have you noticed any other differences in the equine industry between the two countries, maybe even in training methods or things like that?
Yeah, look, probably one of the biggest ones that has always stood out for me is that at home in Australia, you've really got to be prepared to take on a variety of different horses and disciplines. Whereas over here in the States, you can become a lot more, Pacific. And I'm not saying it's better or worse, but certainly, like, if we look at just the reining horse industry here versus Australia, like at home in Australia, like you can't just be a straight up reining horse guy. You've got to be prepared to take other, disciplines and break in other horses and do other things to support it. Where over here, you can just be 100% solely business focused on, reining, for example, as it is for many of the other disciplines that are here. So that's a huge difference to what you see. And that just comes again back to, a numbers thing of both people and horses that help to create those incredible industries over here.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very interesting. I think that's something a lot of us probably don't realize, especially if we've been in the States our whole life. We're so used to those different specialized trainers and disciplines and things like that. Um, so yeah, that makes sense 100%. And then obviously when you're with horses for, extended period of time, you're constantly learning from them. You're constantly learning from other horsemen and things of that nature. How have you seen your own training methods evolve over the years?
Oh man, that's a great question, and it has been and still is just it's probably one of the best parts of the journey, right? I look at, it's funny, like I remember a mentor, and this is going way back when I was early days in Australia, a guy by the name of Damien Kerr, and he'd been across here and ended up doing some traveling with a very famous horseman over here, Ray Hunt. And Damien said, like, when he came home from the States back to Australia, it was like all the horses to that point that he had worked and trained and put all of his time in. Like he said, it was like there was so many holes in it that he like just didn't even know where to begin. It was almost like at that stage easy to go and start afresh on new horses. And I think that when we look back, on the different things that we've done through the course of the years, like there's things now like that I can't even stand to watch of myself because I'm like, oh, it was so bad. And I think that that's a healthy way to be because it, like we do want to, continue to, pursue knowledge and to pursue better ways to do things for, our horses, people around that we're helping, and obviously ourselves. So there's been so many people that have been so gracious with their time towards me over the years that have been influences, and to have that kind of poured into you as a young guy and be able to kind of try to somewhat take it on, and then to try to instill that in other people around me, like that's a I think a pretty big mantle to sort of carry to pass it along. But I would say that where we're at right now, it's significantly different what we're doing now to when we started. And I hope that in a year, in 10 years from now, I'll look back to where I am right now and be like, oh, you're an idiot. Like, what were you thinking, right? Like, I just hope that it keeps having that kind of growth. I think that anytime that I feel that I get to be around other people, either, at a high level in their horsemanship or competition, I see those same things in them. Like there's that hunger for knowledge and pursuit of excellence that just is never ending.
Absolutely. And growth really is the center point of anything you do in life that you're pursuing, especially at the highest level. And, you may be at the top of the game, but you're still forever learning. And if you're not learning, you're just going to regress, really. So, and obviously, with the animals that we work with, there's so much to learn from each individual one. They're all so different. So, that's a really great perspective.
Well, look at even here we are with Horse Illustrated doing a webinar that
Yeah.
was at one time like essentially we're looking at magazines. I remember some of the earlier horse magazines, right? Like come out maybe once a month if you're lucky, and now look at the evolution just in this in itself is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just something you have to do. You have to evolve with wherever the society's taking you, wherever the industry's taking you. And no, that's a really great point. So, of course, Liberty has been kind of a core thing in your work, and that kind of led you and your wife Elizabeth to creating the International Liberty Horse Association. So, can you kind of talk about creating that association, what went into it, why you did so, and what it stands for?
Yeah, I still get up some days and be like, why did we do that? You're right. Like the Liberty for us has essentially become a little bit of a niche that we sort of fell into, and the origin behind that, just kind of the background on it, was again going back to essentially a lot of those old horse films. I was always so fascinated by the things that those horses were able to do, and how they would get them to do them, and so forth. And of course, at that time, I ended up years later stumbling into a guy by the name of Heath Harris. And for those of you that do or know or have seen Man from Snowy River, he was the guy that went down the hill. He was the stuntman that went down the hill. And Heath really poured into us, probably 30 to 50 years worth of knowledge that just really jumped us ahead in our Liberty work. And he really had a system and a format. We were just sort of winging it until we sort of came across, to Heath, and he really just kind of helped set those foundations. And I think that one of the things that I think that Heath would look, he's now, passed away, but I think one of the things that I would think that he would look at now is that we haven't stopped where he left us. We've continued to, progress with that training and refine it, and in some ways, hopefully made it even, better. So with that, and we're lucky enough for him to still be around when we started the Liberty Horse Association. It was really my wife's idea that she was led to kind of felt to start this association, and the concept behind it is that with Liberty at that time, unless that you were an entertainer, an equine entertainer, or you worked on films and movies, or other areas like that, there wasn't really a platform to give people the opportunity to showcase their horses at Liberty. And so one of the things that kind of that kind of helped to continue to evolve that is that we wanted people to be able to take their own horses, and there's nothing like competition that helps things grow and evolve. We've seen just in the few short years that the association has been up and going, like things that people are doing now, if they were doing them, say, back 5, 10, 15 years ago, they would have been at the pinnacle of Liberty. And so it's been just incredible to see, because of competition, how that growth has really, evolved so quickly. And it's given people a place, like what we've seen, like when we were teaching a lot of clinics prior to the Liberty Association being sort of formed, people would reach a point with their Liberty work and then kind of be like, it's fun, but like, where do I go with this, right? So that was really a big part in seeing the association sort of like grow and take off, because now when people came along to a clinic, when they got interested in it, there was somewhere to kind of go with it, and it helped to connect people in community of something that they all equally shared. And so that's been, like both of myself and Elizabeth, like the great part about it is seeing people doing it. The downside to it is that either of us don't compete ourselves in it. We feel like that, as an association, just to try to be there to get it going, and to, it's just, it's a place that we ourselves won't compete, but kind of at times jealous of that, right? Like to have a platform to be able to do it.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's just been amazing to see the people, how quickly that they have come along, and how that it has continued to grow. And realistically, the next two major areas, which hasn't been essentially publicly announced, so I'm kind of letting the cat out the bag a little bit here, but is offering classes both in dressage and jumping for people that want to ride brideless.
Okay. Awesome.
And, it's not to take anything away. I have a huge admiration for, the dressage and jumping. Like, it's not to take anything away from that.
Sure.
It's just simply to provide a platform for people that want to, pursue that and test themselves and their horses in that particular area, somewhere to be able to do it. So we're looking forward to that rolling out for the very first time at this year's Liberty Festival.
That's amazing. And like you said, it kind of goes back to you have to keep growing and evolving. And, the more people you reach within different corners of the industry, that kind of gives you a platform to do that. Um, and so with Liberty, for those who maybe are kind of unfamiliar with it or haven't tried it, what would kind of be your sales pitch for trying Liberty with your horse?
Yeah, that's a great question. Why is Liberty one of the things that we've kind of like essentially pushed and promoted for the years that we have? So I think that, a lot of people see it, and when I refer to the movie work, they're thinking about the horses laying down or rearing up or, doing those particular movements. But like in most elite sports with horses, what we tend to see is that like the better that you become in one area, it has a ripple effect across other areas of your horsemanship, right? So one of the things that I often say is that like if you've got a Liberty horse that is essentially working really well, you've got a horse that there's a lot of other things that you can go out and do. It doesn't just limit you to Liberty. So, and unfortunately sometimes there's a bit of disconnect between the foundations of what we would do in starting a horse at Liberty versus say starting a young horse to go dressage or to go jumping on. And they're actually way similar and more overlap than anybody really thinks. Like one of the biggest areas in the performance horse side that we often touch on, most of our business here at home in Kentucky is actually mostly dressage horses and jumping horses and thoroughbreds. And the reason why is that when those horses, there's either 2 points in their careers. One, if it's a young horse that is starting out their career in this, we will essentially, go through not only work them and do some of our Liberty work with them, but also then go ahead and ride and get them educated under saddle. Or it's in the event that the wheels have fallen off the show, okay? And in the incorporation of the Liberty, one of the major components to it that we see is that it really teaches horses how to think and how to learn. And why do I say that? Because we create scenarios in which that the horses are needing to make decisions. And in that, we see that effect then translate across to other areas, whether it be under saddle and or on the ground. So Liberty isn't just something for somebody that wants to go out and, do a trick. It's more of a fundamental basis of how to better prepare your horse for the things that he might have in his career and life.
Sure. And, it's kind of great that you mentioned that because one of my questions for you is going to be, you've obviously had success across so many different disciplines, whether it be reining or colt starting or jumping even. So do you find that it really is kind of those principles of Liberty that has helped you find success in those other disciplines?
Yeah, probably the thing that I always wish that I would do more often is, pursue one for a longer period of time. To do it because I am truly such a fan of horses and people that are competing at at a high level, and it's it's something that I'm always drawn to, whether it be the 3-day event here in Lexington, whether it be the show jumping World Cups or all the reining and so watching horses and that being able to perform at that level and to do it in such a manner that they're happy and enjoying their job, like that's just such a highlight. And you get to watch and witness a lot of people that do it really well, and to see that part, like that's what I love. I'm just a fan of watching the horse go out to be able to to compete and to do things at a high level, and whether that's in the Liberty work or others. So being a part of that to some small degree, and to be able to incorporate the use of Liberty to help some of those horses reach those goals is pretty special.
No, I think it's great that you've kind of dipped your toes in so many different disciplines. It goes to show that you truly are a fan of the horse as an athlete, as a being, and all the different people in it. And I think it helps people from all sorts of different backgrounds kind of relate to you and learn from the different work that you do. So I think that's a really special aspect of what you do. You've obviously talked quite a bit about how your love for horses really did come from, equine films and seeing these horses in films. And you yourself and your career have, had the chance to be a part of equine entertainment and have even worked on films and TV shows, especially Heartland. Can you kind of talk about that and what that experience is like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously the big difference between what we referred to as live show, which is like equine theatre, like so a cavalier, or going in and performing in front of a live audience versus a film work, like they both have their pros and cons.
Mhm.
Obviously on film, like one of the greatest things is being able to redo the scene several times. One of the worst things is having to redo the scene several times, right? Like, so it's a, hit and miss on that aspect. It might be that the horse completely nailed it and the actor forgot their lines,
Sure.
or the light was in the wrong place, or the plane flew over, or, whatever that might look like. But we've had a lot of fun over the years with the filming stuff. I would love to say that we've had the opportunity to do more than what we've done. But in the areas that we have got to be able to do some stuff, obviously Heartland's been a big one that we've been able to be a part of, and that's been just a great experience. Obviously what makes that experience great. Number one, it is the ease and the setup for us in being able to perform what they're asking of the horse to do, because there's sometimes in some situations that we will come across where whether it be the director, producer, and the writers, and that, like, what they've written is pretty unrealistic, both from a standpoint you'd probably never do that with a horse, and also where the location is, like whether it be beside a busy road or in a big open field. And so it's met with lots of different challenges like that. They've become and evolved a long ways in terms of the horse welfare, and there's a lot of they've got people constantly on set that are keeping an eye on that, which is a great thing. So the film aspect has been a lot of fun to be a part of. One of the other elements that I never thought in a million years that we would do is we've done and supplied horses a lot for like photo shoots, and that's always something pretty interesting. Working with the models and actors, or the photographers. One of them was the Versace, I think spring or summer catalogs, and to see the behind the scenes, like the end photo ends up with maybe one or two models and a horse, and behind the scene you've got a couple hundred people, and it's always those moments are so fascinating, because you'll have a makeup artist running there with hairspray or something, and just with no regard whatsoever of never been around a horse, and will spray that in the model's hair, or go to do the touch of makeup, and you can see that horse's eyes light up, and you're like, oh, you just nearly died and you don't even know what happened. So that's been really fun. I always try to say that if Jennifer Lawrence ever takes up reigning, that we're going to take credit for it. During one of the shoots in New York, we had her for, I think it was a Vogue magazine, and we had her on spinning one of the reiners and stuff. So that was a pretty cool little deal to get to have been a part of. But yeah, it's the live show comes with its own magic, right? Because in that live show, when something really truly comes together that's magical, you can feel the audience feel it. And to see that emotion that those horses still, after all these, thousands of years that we've been, essentially around, to see how those horses can still touch people emotionally is pretty amazing.
Absolutely. And I think on both ends of the spectrum, whether it's horses in pop culture or these live shows where they can really see the magic of the horse, I think they're both wonderful to be a part of, because it's contributing to the awareness of these animals and of the industry as a whole. And I'm sure you've felt that in what you do.
You bet.
So, well, kind of on the note of the emotions horses can evoke and things like that, are there any horses in particular that have really kind of stood out to you throughout your career?
I always remember, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to this, like, we're truly meant to only be entitled to one really good horse in our entire life. I feel like that by the grace of God, that I've broken that mold and been around a bunch of them that have just really been very special. Right back to, my first, pony, Tonto, was a little steel grey pony that my mum and dad bought off the side of a road. Right through to the current team of horses. Outback Arafura, which was a quarter horse stallion had in Australia, was really the one that I kind of, promote as being that put me on the map to start with in Australia in this particular area. From there, I've got, two of my other older horses that I brought from Australia over, Amelia and Apollo. They've been, everywhere, literally all across Australia, all over the US, Canada. They've been and seen and done so much. Swampy, of course, from Road to the Horse back in 2012. And he's just been an amazing horse. Like, just the things that he has done and the integrity and honesty that he has is just so exceptional. I've got a really amazing horse right now that is a part-bred Lusitano. JP Sensationals, his name, or Applejack is the stable name, and he's a big, pretty Palomino. We've got the horses that we showed in the reining, which is, Vegemite, and then another one right now called Saquon. A couple of ponies. So look, there's been a long list of them. I can't say that there's just been, essentially, that one. One of the greatest roles that, though, any of those horses have ever played is when I get to see my kids that are, now sort of 4 and 5, get to go out and to ride those horses and to know those horses at the level that they've performed and the things that they have performed in, to see them just be able to dial it back and come and hang out with those kids, it is just amazing. Like, I never understood when people said, the value of a good kid's horse, and like getting to experience that is like really surreal.
Yeah, that's awesome. It kind of sometimes it's like those horses know to be different and gentle around children, and it's really special. But yeah, with the variety of things you've done in your career and horses you've been around, it makes sense that there's quite a few who've stood out, and it can be difficult to pinpoint it. But I think that's just a special thing to have been surrounded by so many great horses. But obviously horses are kind of an obvious answer here, but if you had to pinpoint the best part about your career, your favorite part of your career, how would you kind of describe that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is definitely a tough one, to nail down. Probably what I've found for myself, interestingly, here enough in the last 12 months, I was able to be a part of an event called the Gaucho Derby down in Patagonia, and it certainly has become a real standout event and experience. I remember reading, one of the girls wrote a deal going down there, and they said that you'll get the Derby that you need, and that was so true. Like, the highs, the lows, and everything that went with it. That was just an incredible event. So I would say that easily that has been, probably one of the biggest standout experiences, so far, has been, being able to be a part of that event down there.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's an experience that really sticks with you, and you probably learned a lot about yourself in it as well. So, and that's the cool thing about horses, is you can have so many different experiences all around the world and doing different things and disciplines and things like that. So, kind of wanted to ask you a few fun questions. And so,
Yeah.
on that point, and that might be your answer, do you have a favorite place that horses have taken you?
Yeah, there has been a lot. And I think to kind of just, on what you just said, like, the horse has been so incredible to open up doors, because he doesn't care if you're rich or poor. He doesn't care, where you are in society. And it's put me in the room with, people that are struggling to get by, and put me in the room with people that are, some of the wealthiest people in the world. And I think that that's just so incredible about the horse and what he's able to do, because he makes it an equal playing field.
Absolutely.
So some of the, definitely the highlights, obviously Patagonia that we just talked about. There's been some pretty iconic places in Australia that, that we've been. Recently here, went to Spain. That was mind-boggling, like just the history of the horse that is in that particular country. Japan, obviously places up like going to the Heartland Ranch on set. It would be hard to narrow it down to one or two.
Yeah. Yeah, it's special that horses can, this one animal can take you all across the world and open up all those doors. Well, obviously this whole interview has been about your career as a horseman, but if you had to do any other career outside of horses, do you have any idea what you would be interested in?
Yeah, I think that the two that, God didn't give me with amazing hair and a voice, so the singing deal was definitely out, but that one might have been up there. But I think the motocross, X Games, freestyle motocross, that one would have been high in the list, or something in the military.
Okay. Then I have to ask, it doesn't have to be something that's horse related. Is there anything you think that Americans maybe don't realize about Australia, or maybe is a stereotype that isn't true?
What would be we don't drink Fosters. That would be a pretty common one, that everybody thinks that we drink Fosters. I'd actually never seen Fosters ever in Australia. So, yeah, just debugging that one for you.
Got it. You have a horse named Vegemite. Do you eat Vegemite?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll make sure that if you're ever up for have you had Vegemite?
I haven't. I've heard very mixed reviews.
Oh, you are missing out. It is the breakfast of champions.
Okay.
You cannot go wrong with some Vegemite on toast in the morning.
I will hold you to that if I ever try it out, because I've certainly heard both ends of the spectrum on that one. So as I mentioned, we did have an audience Q&A portion. So we had a few submitted on social media. I'll kind of dive into those. As I'm asking those, anybody that's currently in the audience, you should see a Q&A button on your screen if you want to go ahead and type in and submit some. I think we've already had one sent in. I'll review those and ask those as we roll through these. So we'll kind of dive into the ones from social real quick. Nancy says that she has a young mare trained in cutting and reining, but she loses focus, becomes agitated when she rides her into the pen away from other horses. And so this herd-bound behavior just kind of causes her to struggle with her to get to the other side of the arena where the horses are. So she just kind of wants some suggestions for helping her to trust Nancy, so she's doesn't think that she needs to get to those other horses.
That's the herd bound deal. Like I really honestly for a long time didn't give it a lot of perspective, or I'd never, I'd heard people talk about it and I just thought, they're just, they don't know what they're really doing. And man, when I got to experience it for myself with a stud, when it came to horses being herd bound, they're not kidding. It is a real thing to deal with. I think that with trying to just answer this in a timely fashion, and obviously without seeing the scenario itself, the first thing that I probably go to is actually on a medical side, looking at hormones, where that's at, what could be some options there, because particularly in the mares like that, I've seen some significant differences with just being able to take some advice from different vets on some treatments there. That has been a game changer for some people to be able to enjoy their mares. So that would be one really big part that I'd firstly dive into and look at. I think the other thing that becomes tricky with the herd bound situation is when people are limited to be able to change the environment. So for some people, their only option is to have that horse constantly with the horse that they're herd bound to. And again, this is a very case by case situation. It's where that we've seen, separating from that horse that they're herd bound to, replacing it with, whether it be a pony, whether it be a goat or another animal, in helping to create those distances. And one example of what we've done, been able to do here, and again, that is more so because of the environment, is be able to create distance over a period of time. So, for example, if the horse was really bound to the one horse, it might start out those two horses are in the same pasture and then being put beside one another, but in separate pastures, and slowly make that migration. We've found a lot of success with that. But it is a tricky one, and certainly without probably being able to see some of this firsthand, it's hard to give, much more direct responses to it in this moment.
Sure. Yeah. And the next one's about a specific case as well. From Janet, she mentioned she bought a new horse last June for the purpose of liberty, but he's anxious and has a lack of focus. She's had him with the trainer for 3 months, and he's great on the lead, but not off the lead. And when trying to do a pattern or mark, he just continues to wander off. So she's wondering if you have any suggestions for kind of getting his focus and maybe reducing his anxiety.
Yeah, you bet, for sure. When it comes to like the lack of focus and that, I guess for me personally, I always sort of like tend to go back to thinking it along these lines, that I know that if you and I were talking, Mary, and the conversation becomes so uninteresting that you like decided that you had to get on your phone because it was just like boring you to death. So I always think about like, is the conversation, what I'm asking of my horses to do, interesting enough? Can I be the most important thing to that horse in that moment? Like whether it's my interaction, whether it's the speed that I'm asking them to perform something or do something at. And I'm not talking about just chasing them around an arena. I'm talking about, if the horse is doing something, is it at a level that is challenging enough that the horse is wanting to engage and to have to kind of like think? So, those parts become pretty important. I think that one of the things for Janet in that situation is that I would, if I'm having trouble in a larger area, I'd probably start in a smaller area and make a progression of steps. Like, for example, like if you're in the arena, can I cut the arena into a quarter and then into half and then extend the size of it? Because if I'm having trouble keeping that focus and that attentiveness in a smaller area, well, I know when it becomes a larger area that it's only going to become, a larger difficulty, a bigger problem to be able to deal with. And a lot of it has to do with like how mobile that you are on your own feet, being able to move around to interact with that horse. So again, the smaller area, if one of the things that people often say is like, can you do liberty in any size area? And I'm like, absolutely you can. It comes down to two things: how fit you are and how fit do you want to be, because you are going to have to move your feet. And so that becomes a pretty big part. But I'd definitely go back to probably a small area to begin with, and then to see if I can keep the the connection at that point. I think the anxiety issue that comes along with it is probably because there is a little bit of a lack of connection to the horse. So the horse is getting anxious about the things that are going on around him, but I find that as the horse becomes more connected, that anxiety is going to help drop away because of your interaction with them.
Right. So kind of on the note of a big area versus a small area, Gracie had the question of how do you approach taking liberty outside of the arena, especially on grass, because her problem is she's got her smaller areas around pen. If she wants to go to a larger area, she's in a grass paddock and she kind of fights the horse's attention for the grass. So maybe how to kind of navigate that.
Yeah, that's a real thing. There's nothing more challenging than when at times that we've had to go to do certain things, whether you can say like just a photo shoot, right? And of course they want the horse in the say just in the background looking at the camera, and they don't tell you until you get there that it's on grass. Well, of course, the horse's first natural instinct is to want to go to the grass. So what we always do is we try to ask those questions ahead of time, like what's the footing? What are we looking at? Is it, grass or other? So for me personally, if I know ahead of time that it's going to be on grass, number one, I'm going to work all of my horses at home on grass. Okay. The other thing that I'll do when that time goes to come around, particularly if your horse doesn't have the opportunity to graze often, before I go to work him, I'll tip him out for 30 minutes on that grass before I even go to work. So by the time that I come into work, they've kind of got past that, that moment, like, oh my God, look at all the green grass. Like, so I'm going to stay ahead of that and then start to ask of the horse to sort of go about working around rather than just going straight from the stall out onto the grass and expecting him to, jump on. I can just imagine, our kids, if, we've got a big old ice cream sitting out there and be like, do everything but not look at the ice cream, then the focus, shifts pretty. So I would let them eat the ice cream first and then go about going to work.
Yeah, it's a really great comparison because it's got to be the same thing. It's just immediately you lead them to some candy or some ice cream. Of course, they're going to gravitate towards that. So
Yeah.
I think that's a helpful solution. You kind of talked about the Liberty Festival and some plans you have for it. Joanne said she attended last year for the first time and she had a great time. So she's just curious if there's a estimated date for this year's festival.
Yeah, actually, I was just asking the team myself here. It is the 9th through the 12th of October of this year. So again, back at the Alltech Arena here in Lexington, Kentucky.
Very cool. All right. I know some of our team went last year and they really enjoyed it. I wasn't able to make it, but all the videos were really, really awesome. So Mill wants to know if you recommend boarding or keeping your horse at home. Obviously, everybody kind of has a different situation, but if you prefer one or over the other.
Yeah, look, for me personally, it would definitely be at home without a doubt. I think that being able to have that interaction with your horse without it being in a boarding facility, I think is just like hands down way better.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. She also had the question if you had a preference on recommending first-time horse owners in terms of breeds, if you had any preferences there, or if it just depends on the individual.
Yeah, I think that you have to kind of start with what would you like to do, right? I think that that's probably the first most important question of do you have any attributes of wanting to do things competition wise? Are you wanting to just go and trail ride? So that would be the first part that I'm always a big advocate of. Like when I'm helping people shop for horses, myself included, particularly my wife, is you want to buy a horse that you love. Like I tell people all the time when they come to look at horses that at times that we offer for sale, I'm like, if you get out of the car and he just looks at you funny or he, does something odd and you just don't like him, like just walk away and like it's not a big deal. Like you've got to find something that you really, really love. I'm always a big believer that ugly horses and pretty horses cost the same to feed. So I'd rather ride a pretty one. For me, that part has always been good. But I think that in terms of like the breed, first of all, you just got to, comes down to what you'd like to pursue and do. It's pretty tough to go past just as a good, level of a variety of things, whether it be the quarter horse, Australian stock horse. Those two are pretty amazing breeds to, for somebody to dive into to have that you could go a lot of different directions.
Sure. Grace wants to know a little more about your Gaucho Derby experience, if you can kind of tell a little bit of a story there.
Oh, you bet. Oh man, that's there's a lot. Let me see if just dive into one of them. One of several stories that stand out is obviously on, I think it was day 3 or day 4. We were riding along. I had Elliot Holtzman, who's down there in Texas from Versatile Horsemanship, good mate of mine, and a couple other Aussies, Will and Katie, and there was another lady with us, Mary, and we were riding along the edge of most of that country has a lot of cliff face and cliffs down into rivers and that, and we heard, hey, can you help us? And by the time we turned around, Mary's saddle had come loose and she was trying to step off the horse, and at that same time the saddle rotated completely around. Her foot was hung up in the stirrup. She had a hold of the horse by the reins and the horse took off to the sideways, obviously, of course, towards the 50, 60 foot bank, and fortunately her foot came out of the stirrup. The entire saddle then rotated completely underneath the horse all the way back into the horse's flank. Like it is for every rider's like worst nightmare to
Yeah.
see the situation. And this horse galloped off the cliff face completely blind,
Oh my
bucking,
goodness.
and took off. And just in honestly in that moment, we all thought that like if he's not dead, that he's broken at least one or two of his legs. Like it was as bad as wreck as you could imagine. And so after finally getting down to the horse, it was amazing. The horse ended up with a small scratch on one back fetlock, about an inch long. But the challenge on it from there was that the girth either broke, got washed down the river. We retrieved all of her gear from the river, made a makeshift girth, got her kind of put back together. And I mean, you've got to remember that in this situation, it's probably one of the most isolated events in the world.
Yeah.
So your options, you know, and for Mary it was a 6 hour on foot walk back to the last horse station to be able to get a girth and to be able to continue on. But it was the entire race was met with many different situations like that happen throughout it. But we've actually done I'll find a way to maybe send you a link. So we made a documentary out of the experience, which is it's kind of interesting. It covers a lot of those stories and has a lot of pretty unique footage from a standpoint from us. And it ended up actually winning an award through Equus Film Festival here just recently. So that we'll be putting out shortly, and try to link you guys up with the link to that film.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I mean, I think it's one of those things that's so unique compared to what we normally see maybe in the horse industry, and just really fascinating. We do have another question for Mill. She says she's horseless, so she's wondering if you know of any events or horse associations out there that don't require owning a horse to just kind of get involved.
You know, I would say for Mel, like the thing that I would suggest is to volunteer at some of these events to see what kind of you get to really enjoying. You know, for example, like the Liberty Festival, I know that we have a volunteer deal through that, but a lot of these major events, whether it be the Defender here locally with the eventing, like they have a huge volunteer group, and as do most other large events. So I'd suggest getting involved in a volunteer capacity would be a great way to get to experience it.
Yeah, I think that's a great recommendation. I mean, no matter where you are, there's probably a horse event going on somewhere, and just you can
Absolutely.
still be around the animals and horse people that way. And yeah. Well, I think that about wraps up everything we've got here. So Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Really enjoyed talking to you, and I think everybody here could probably say the same. And we'll have the recording of this up on our website and YouTube tomorrow for anybody that missed it. So thank you so much again, and thank you to everybody who joined us.
Mary, thank you so much for having us. It's been a real pleasure to get to talk with you guys and to share with everybody that jumped on the day. Really, really thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Bye, everybody.
See you guys.
Yeah.